Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello everybody and welcome to the afternoon agenda. With me again, Patrick Christie's in for the wonderful Alex Phillips. Now this show is all about discussion and debate on things that are or should be on your agenda. So with that in mind, here's what we will be covering today. Prices at the pump soar, yes that's right, some motorists are paying £20 more for a tank of petrol than a year ago. Why is it happening? And what is it that customers can really expect going forward? With the promise of booster jabs for all adults by the end of the year, we'll ask an NHS doctor how realistic the government's targets are. We're going to be jabbing everyone all day, every day, aren't we? And ahead of a crucial vote in the House of Commons this evening, ladies and gentlemen, we really need to talk about vaccine passports. Are Conservative MPs right to vote against the government? We've also apparently seen a bit of a COVID outbreak in Westminster that could throw a spanner into this vote's works. That's the agenda for you in the next hour. It is a massive, massive day in British politics and in British political history, so don't let it pass you by. Make sure you stay right here. But let us know what's on your agenda as well. gbviews at gbnews.uk, or of course tweet me at gbnews. But first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Polly Middlehurst and this is your news at 4 o'clock. The Health Secretary has announced all 11 countries on the UK's travel red list will be removed from 4 a.m. on Wednesday as Omicron takes hold across the country. Arrivals will still be required to take pre-departure tests and a day 2 PCR. MPs are currently debating new COVID restrictions ahead of a vote this evening, as you've been hearing. Dozens of Conservatives are expected to rebel against the government's Plan B measures, including face masks, mandatory vaccines for NHS staff and COVID passports in England. The measures are, however, expected to pass because the Prime Minister has the support of the Labour Party, which backs tighter controls.
But it's the fact that Omicron hospitalisations are low that means it is now the best time to act. And we've seen during previous waves, we've already seen this, the lag between infections and hospitalisations, it's about 2 weeks. When infections are rising so quickly, we're likely to see a substantial rise in hospitalisations before any measure is starting to have an impact.
Sajid Javid, well, the First Minister of Scotland is advising citizens to limit socialising to a maximum of 3 households during the Christmas period. Nicola Sturgeon told MSPs that she's not asking anybody to cancel Christmas, but she says they must take Omicron seriously. She also confirmed 2 people are in hospital in Scotland with the new variant.
Turning to Christmas Day specifically, or Christmas Eve or Boxing Day, or whenever you have your main family celebration, we are not asking you to cancel or change your plans, and we are not proposing limits on the size of household gatherings. Keeping your celebrations as small as your family circumstances allow is sensible too. Make sure everyone in your gathering is vaccinated and has done a test in advance. Keep rooms ventilated and follow strict hygiene rules.
Well, meanwhile, people are having problems accessing lateral flow tests for a second consecutive day. They're still unavailable via the government website. Double-jabbed people have been asked to take a lateral flow test every day for 7 days if they come into contact with a positive COVID case. The Prime Minister's appealing for volunteers then to help the booster jab rollout. Boris Johnson says tens of thousands of people are needed to help curb the spread of the Omicron variant. The government announced a target of nearly 1 million jabs a day to get all eligible adults vaccinated by the end of December. But former NHS Trust Chairman Roy Lilly told GBNews that is unrealistic.
Just to suddenly on Sunday night say, oh, listen, and by the way, on Monday we're going to do 1 million vaccinations. Oh, no, we're not. We've got to recruit the volunteers with the estates people who've got to sort out the locations, there's security, there's clinical waste, there's logistics. I mean, this is a big operation, and I'm not saying the NHS isn't up for it. It is. But if you simply do the numbers, the carryover of the unvaccinated into the next day, it's just statistically impossible to do by the end of the month.
Well, in the news away from COVID, a mother and her partner have been found guilty over the death of 16-month-old Star Hobson. The toddler died in September last year from catastrophic injuries which she received at her home in West Yorkshire. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill, pictured on the right here, has been charged with her murder, and Star's mother, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, on the left, was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. Star's great-grandfather says he saw worrying signs of abuse.
My blood used to run cold. I just had a horrible, uneasy feeling about the situation. We even called the car Christine after a horror film in the early 80s. And then Anita used to say, you do realise little Star's going to finish up a star in the sky. Kept seeing Frankie bruised, and it was just like a domestic relationship.
Star Hobson's grandfather. Now, National Express has agreed to the takeover of the rival Stagecoach, which sees two of the UK's biggest transport firms merged together. It's going to create a combined worth of around £1.9 billion. And together, they'll have a fleet of around 40,000 vehicles and a workforce of around 70,000 people. You're up to date. Now back to the afternoon agenda.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are watching the afternoon agenda, and we need to talk about vaccine passports. Today is a huge day in British history, and potentially a make or break one for our Prime Minister. We're hearing that around 80 Tory MPs may rebel and vote against Boris Johnson's plans. And in the last couple of hours, the Labour Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pulled out of the vote due to COVID, amongst others, by the way. There's a chance this could lead to some other Labour MPs and indeed, of course, maybe some Tories self-isolating and therefore even fewer votes in favour of Boris's plans. It's definitely one to watch, that. But it's the Tory rebels that are a real conundrum now for Boris Johnson. They come from right across the party and they're rebelling for a variety of different reasons. There are ultra-conservatives, there are libertarians, there are wets. It's across the board. Boris is apparently meeting with the Backbench 1922 committee at around 5:30 p.m, with the actual vote expected somewhere near 6:30. For Tory MPs, some of them anyway, it might be their first ever rebellion. And whilst the Prime Minister's plans are expected to go through, it's what's known in Sir Alex Ferguson footballing terms as squeaky bum time, lads. And it means that Boris Johnson may well, for the remainder of his premiership, be battling against a significant level of mutiny within his own ranks. It also means that the second the Labour Party decides to not support Boris's measures, it's game over, a constant sword of Damocles hanging over his head. I think one thing that's gone underreported is whether or not the SNP should be allowed to vote on this. They've said they'll support the government, but this stuff doesn't really affect them. So the SNP will have an influence over English people's lives by getting to vote on legislation that will have no real impact on them whatsoever. Can you imagine if that was the other way around? Nicola Sturgeon would turn puce, wouldn't she, and start stomping her feet, crying freedom. The irony is, of course, by waving Boris Johnson's legislation through, she keeps him in a job and, with that, ensures that the chance of having an independence referendum remains non-existent. The case for vaccine passports is that there is a dangerous new strain of the variant on the loose, and in order to keep other people safe, it's important for people to show that they've been fully jabbed before they enter a nightclub, indoor unseated venues with more than 500 people, unseated outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any venue with more than 10,000 people. Or, of course, proof of a negative test taken in the past 48 hours, or that they have an exemption for that matter as well. But there's definitely another side to this as well, isn't there? A vaccine passport is a document that shows that you can still contract COVID and pass it on, although vaccines do supposedly reduce the strength of this virus. I have a feeling that once they're imposed, they'll never be removed, and this is quite a big deal. They'll be here forever. Britain will be a country that will always have COVID passports. Why? Well, because we're constantly being told that we're always going to have COVID. So by definition, we'll also have the passports, won't we? And then, why now is another issue. Over this current variant, over Omicron? Many people find this hard to swallow. All of the early indications, thankfully, appear to show that Omicron is more transmissible but less harmful, and in that sense, it could potentially be quite a good thing. The latest data out of South Africa appears to show that 4% of patients who contracted it died, compared with a fifth in the other waves of their infection. That's a staggering drop. But there could be other factors for this as well, higher initial infection rates, for example, and a younger population. But if Omicron's severity really is lower, if all the data really does show that Omicron is less harmful, it hints towards another reason why Boris may have gone nuclear: to save his own skin. Are the new COVID restrictions, including permanent COVID vaccine passports, actually being introduced as a tactic to get dodgy Christmas parties, wallpaper and sleaze off the front pages and, crucially, out of people's mouths? It's that question, and the very real possibility that it may well be true, that is making some MPs reluctant to vote for it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an historic day in British history, this, an historic vote. Which way would you vote, and why? Yes, well, make sure you get in touch with that. Which way would you vote and why? gbviews@gbnews.uk. So, with the Tory rebellion on vaccine passports set to take place in just a few hours, who better than our political editor Darren McCaffrey to whiz us through what's going on? And he's live for us right now on College Green. Darren, what's going on?
Well, MPs are currently debating, Patrick, inside the Commons, as they have been this afternoon, about a whole range of issues, most notably, of course, about that big subject of vaccine passports. It is certainly the most contentious of the votes tonight, and it looks like the government is facing a pretty serious rebellion, potentially the biggest that it has seen in this Parliament under Boris Johnson's leadership, ranging from maybe 60 up to 80. You have to remember, Boris Johnson's got a majority of 79, could mean he may have to rely on the opposition to get this through. Never good for a government to have to rely on opposition MPs to get legislation through the Commons, but that is potentially where the Prime Minister finds himself this evening, though he is doing his damned hardest to ensure that doesn't happen, calling up individual rebels, and he's going to be talking to the party as a whole a little later on in the next hour or so to try and convince, control, charm maybe some of them around to his position. It all comes today, though, Patrick, as we heard from Chris Whitty. He briefed the Cabinet that met a little bit earlier on today, pretty gloomy from the Chief Medical Officer, saying that cases of Omicron now appear to be doubling every 2 to 3 days in the UK, which would make it the fastest ever strain of COVID that we've seen. And he says that it's too early to say about the severity, though the evidence from South Africa seems to suggest that it may be milder. But he said that the expectation is that we will see a significant increase in hospitalisations. That's what the Chief Medical Officer is saying and has said to Cabinet today. Let's get the thoughts of Chris Green. He's the Conservative MP for Bolton and joins us outside Parliament. Very good afternoon to you, Chris. We heard from Chris Whitty today. He's been talking to Cabinet colleagues. Clearly the Cabinet are convinced about the necessity for these measures, but why not you?
Well, I think the government needs to give compelling evidence before it takes any actions. Going down the vaccine passport route now when we've got such a comprehensive rollout of the first, the second jabs and 23 million, 24 million third jabs as well. They're all effective against every variant of concern when it comes to hospitalisation, going into intensive care or death. We ought to have more confidence in the scientists and medics who have delivered so much.
In saying that, but those scientists and medics are saying that actually these restrictions are necessary.
And many scientists and medics and other people interested in other areas are very concerned about cancer, very concerned about children's education, very concerned about the economy, very concerned about civil liberties. And actually, the government hasn't laid out the compelling argument in terms of the balance of risks, the balance of locking down or having further restrictions on the one hand, or the balance of the impacts on society.
But when it comes to these specific measures today, they're not really any form of lockdown. You're asking people to wear masks, which is not a big necessary ask. You're asking people to show whether you've been vaccinated or you've got a negative test. I mean, that's not a massive imposition on individuals, and it shouldn't in any ways affect the economy, should it?
And what impact will that have over Christmas? They're very worried about Christmas and the transmission of disease over Christmas. What impact will these measures have over that period of time? I don't think they've set out a compelling argument saying it's really going to reduce it. So already, therefore, looking at Plan C in the new year.
Is it not right to be cautious?
Always cautious, but also you have to have confidence in your own words.
How is bringing England into line with Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in the midst of potentially 200,000 daily cases? How's that not?
Well, we have to have confidence in what the government and what the scientists are saying. And if they're saying the vaccination programme is the way out, is the first vaccine the way out, the second vaccine, the third vaccine clearly is not the way out at the moment. The government does have number 4 and 5 on order. We're going to wait until then. The government's got to have more confidence in what it's doing. And also, if it's going to change its plans, move the goalposts as it has done, it's actually got to have the evidence to justify that. And at the moment, one person somewhere in the world may have died with this new variant, but not of it. And I think we need more compelling evidence before we actually, yes, at the beginning, have an incremental change in our society. But we can see the pressure mounting up for more restrictions.
Just very finally and quickly, if you can, how damaging would a large rebellion be where the government had to rely on the opposition, the credibility of Boris Johnson's leadership? He can't convince his own MPs.
No government should ever rely on the opposition. This is why the Prime Minister should listen to the grassroots voices that are increasingly raising their concerns about the impact the government's actions, supported wholeheartedly by the opposition, is having on normal people's daily lives.
OK, Chris, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Chris Green, Conservative MP for Bolton, who is going to be, as I say, Patrick, along with dozens of his colleagues voting against the government tonight. Of course, the government and the scientific advisors advising the government are arguing that potentially, if you do wait for some of those scientific evidence, if you wait for some of the hospitalisation figures, it may well be too late at that stage, hence why they feel they need to take preemptive action. I should also add just two other little tidbits of news this afternoon of importance, Patrick. That is, first of all, that the government are going to remove the red list for hotel mandatory quarantine from 4 a.m. tomorrow morning for 11 countries. They feel that essentially the Omicron variant is so seeded in the UK that actually trying to put people back into hotels will make very little difference. And the other thing is that it looks like 6 MPs, including 3 members of the Shadow Cabinet, including the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, have tested positive today. I don't know about you anecdotally, it does seem that a lot of people, particularly here in London, are testing positive at the moment. They are all self-isolating.
Indeed. Darren, thank you very much. Darren, great stuff, that, and really informative as well. I think the red list thing's interesting, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen at home? What do you make of this? Does it make you more confident now that potentially that little winter getaway, if you've been fortunate enough to book one, might actually happen? I've got one in the can, fingers crossed, and I just can see now the dreaded situation. You get there, you get all the way through, and then boom, the PCR test comes back and the dream is shattered and I end up somewhere like Morecambe, as lovely as it is. But anyway, we're now joined by former Conservative Shadow Health Secretary Ann Widdecombe, a favourite of GB News. Ann, thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming on and imparting your views. Where are you at with this? How would you vote? What's your views on it and why?
Oh, I have no doubt at all that I would be voting with the rebels. Having said that, I would urge caution about the numbers of rebels. Whenever this sort of thing happens, there is a hard core of people who are voting on the merits or the demerits of the case. And then there are a lot of other people who, scenting government weakness, think this is the moment to try and bargain their vote for something that they want, some concession on some other bill that they want. And all that is going on now, and the whips are putting on enormous pressure, as they always do, and there'll be a big charm offensive going on. And I wouldn't believe any numbers at this moment. But it does seem as if it's going to be at least fairly sizable, and I would certainly be among it were I there. And the reason for that is this: Omicron's very mild so far. There is, as you heard that MP say, no evidence so far that it's going to result in huge numbers of hospitalisations or fatalities or anything else. So you've got to ask yourself this: if every time the virus mutates, which it will, because that's in the nature of a virus, it will mutate. If every time it mutates, is the government going to go into immediate countermeasures which damage the economy, damage education, damage waiting lists? Are they going to do that just in case? I mean, that is what's being said. Not let's do this because there's darn good evidence, but let's do it just in case.
Yes, well, I had Michael Fabricant earlier on today in one of my earlier shows, and he was adamant that Boris Johnson is doing this and is being as cautious as he is because he's towing that line of he nearly died from it and it's really changed his mind on the way this is. There is a flip side to it, and I know personally as well that some MPs are of this view, which is that maybe he's gone nuclear on this to try to get other stuff off the front pages, whether it's dodgy parties or whether it's wallpaper or whether it's just sleaze in general. Where are you on that? Because I know the idea that he might be doing this more so that he actually wants to remove other news from the agenda is putting some MPs off voting for it.
Well, I mean, it's quite true. There's always news management going on in number 10, and there could be a bit of news management in this. But somehow I doubt if he would carry his cabinet with him, if he was actually going to impose measures which are going to damage the economy. It's going to damage the hospitality trade. It already is. They're going to damage the economy. And you don't do that purely for PR reasons. You might see it as a benefit on the side, but it wouldn't be a cause to do it. And certainly governments that I have known of both parties would be unlikely to embark on something this major just as a PR exercise.
Thank you very much, as always, for your time. I know it won't be long before we speak again. Ann Widdecombe there, of course, just giving her own views, a former Conservative Shadow Health Secretary, so direct relevance with what we're talking about today. But joining us now is Siobhan McDonough, who's a Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, and voting in favour of vaccine passports this evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Can you explain why you're voting in favour?
Because I think it's entirely reasonable. If you're going to a large event, we're not talking about going to the pub, going to a restaurant, but if you're going to a big concert or a big outside event, that you should have some confidence that you're as secure as possible. And all that people are being asked to show is that either evidence they've had the jabs or that they've had a lateral flow test, which many of us take on a daily basis. I don't believe that that is too much to ask.
For some people, it's the permanence of the whole thing, isn't it? If we're going to have to live with COVID forever and we introduce vaccine passports, it means that we're always going to have vaccine passports. And I presume it always means that you're going to have to keep getting your booster shots. So we might be here in 50 years' time on our 550th booster shot or whatever it is. Can you see why people might have a problem with that?
I can see that people extrapolate to almost obsessive proportions, but that is not what is happening right now. I would encourage everybody to have their jabs, but nobody is being prevented from going anywhere if they don't have their jabs. They are simply being asked to show that they have a negative flow test, which consists of sticking something like a cotton bud up your nose. And I really don't think that's too much to ask to keep other people safe.
thing that I've not heard anything about so far anyways, what about people coming into this country? Because, look, we do have a tourism industry, especially in the capital, for example, especially in places like the Lake Districts and various pockets of the country. You know, are we potentially going to be reducing our tourism intake? Maybe if people come from a country where they've not had to take booster jabs or they've not maybe been vaccinated at all. That could be an economic impact for us, couldn't it?
I'm not sure that you can tell me any country in the world that doesn't have some form of vaccine system to do with coronavirus. Every single government everywhere, certainly in the developed world, are encouraging their populations to have it. And in the developing world, they're just seeking enough support from the richer parts of the globe to get that vaccine.
Thank you very much, and it was fantastic to have you on the show. And that was, of course, the wonderful Siobhan McDonough, the Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, who is voting in favour of vaccine passports this evening. So we've already had both sides of the coin, and we're rattling through these guests, ladies and gentlemen, on what is a seismic day, potentially, in British politics, and a day that could have a massive impact, will have a massive impact on the future of this country. So we're now joined by Stephen Dorrell, former Health Secretary under John Major. Thank you very much for making the time for us here. Which way do you think it's going to go tonight, Stephen?
Well, I think the government will clearly get its way for all the reasons you've been covering, that the opposition will support the government motion, even though there'll be a lot of Conservatives who won't support it. And if I were still a Conservative MP, I'm not an MP and I'm no longer a Conservative, but if I were a Conservative MP, or indeed MP of any party, I would be with the government this evening, not as an endorsement of the way the Prime Minister has behaved, but in order to protect the NHS and protect public health in the likely peak of this Omicron variant issue in January.
Are you not concerned slightly that actually maybe the time for bringing in things like vaccine passports was really when we were in the eye of the Delta storm? Whereas now, Omicron, the initial figures look relatively good. It does remain to be seen, of course, but it looks all right. The numbers coming out of South Africa seem to be quite good for us. So maybe this is not really the right time to be bringing in vaccine passports. It could be perceived as an overreaction.
I don't think that, actually. And if I may say so, I don't agree with your extrapolation, as Siobhan said, from a short-term response to a likely peak of Omicron in January and saying, therefore, it will be permanent forever. I think this is, I share the view expressed by a lot of Conservatives that the government has handled this extraordinarily badly, and I share the view that it isn't right for this to be announced by the Prime Minister on a Sunday night as an apparent reaction to his political difficulties. I think this should be handled in a much more measured way and could easily have been announced last week. There's nothing we know now that we didn't know last week.
No, but surely, well, I don't know where you are on this. I will just ask you, actually. Do you realistically think that once we've voted for vaccine passports in this country, if we always are going to have COVID in this country, we're therefore always going to have vaccine passports, aren't we? This is one vote for the rest of our lives, isn't it?
No, I don't think that is right. I think that, well, first of all, as I understand it, the powers that are being sought by the government in tonight's vote are temporary and therefore would have to be renewed. And it's one thing to seek those powers against the background of a likely peak in January. It's another thing entirely for a government to seek to prolong them when the peak is past and the pressure on the NHS is easing. So I think it's a proper short-term response to a short-term peak of demand on emergency services in the health service.
I'm sure there's a lot of people who will be hoping that you're correct, but may have a little whiff of scepticism. But hey, that's the beautiful multi-sided country that we live in, isn't it? Stephen Dorrell, thank you very, very much, former Health Secretary there under John Major. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, what did you make of all of that? Three top quality guests there discussing a very, very seismic day in British political history. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Make sure you keep them coming in thick and fast. Getting loads of good ones here from both sides of the coin as well. Some of you really do think, hey, absolutely, I would back this. Some of you are saying there's no overreaction going on here at all. This is very, very necessary. On the flip side, there's clearly a lot of you who do not feel that way either. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Or, of course, you can tweet us at GBNews, because I do really want to know what you think about all of this. Are the Conservative MPs, right to vote against the government? We've actually got a poll running on that right now, so you can go and cast your vote. Let's survey the nation, see what you all really think. Well, look, let's take a quick break now and get a check on the weather. We'll be back with you shortly.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast. There'll be a lot of cloud during the next 24 hours, shrouding the hills of the western UK and keeping things mild. There'll be some rain as well, but that will tend to ease later as this area of high pressure moves in for the rest of the week and begins to properly settle things down widely. Before that happens, these weather fronts and these tightly packed isobars across northern parts of the UK bring wind and rain for Tuesday evening. Some heavier rain at times for the Northwest Highlands, but through the night, the area of cloud and rain across Scotland sinks south. It clears from the far north and northwest, but it edges into Northern Ireland, parts of northern England as well. It stays cloudy across southern areas, but through this slice of central UK, clearer spells and perhaps a few pockets of fog first thing. A chilly start here as well, and once the fog clears, plenty of sunshine emerging across parts of North and East Wales, the Midlands, eastern England. Also turning brighter to the north of the central belt, some decent sunshine here and less windy compared to Tuesday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle, more persistent damp weather for parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northwest England. And this area of cloud and outbreaks of rain starts to move north once again on Wednesday evening, pushing into the rest of Scotland eventually overnight. Meanwhile, it stays mostly cloudy across Wales, southern and southwest England. But for the Midlands, eastern England, southern Scotland, clear spells, which will lead to, in some places, frost and even fog to begin things on Thursday. Once any fog clears, though, the best of any sunny spells will be across eastern Scotland, southern Scotland, northern and eastern England. Generally cloudy skies elsewhere. The rain in the far north of Scotland eases through the day so that by the afternoon actually many places are dry, but it will turn a bit colder. High pressure is extending across the whole of the UK on Thursday and Friday. It will bring a lot of cloud, but it will also turn things colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the afternoon agenda. Now, very shortly, we're going to be going all the way over to North Shropshire because there is, of course, a by-election on, and it's the epicentre of Tory sleaze, supposedly, anyway, because, of course, it is Owen Paterson's former seat. So it's going to be a really good bellwether, isn't it, to see what people actually think about that, what your average man and woman on the street think about that issue, and whether or not, actually, that was all just a storm in the teacup that didn't cut through with the wider masses. It's worth noting, of course, former Tory safe seat. Now, the Lib Dems have been made the Bucky's favourites. We're going to have a load of fantastic guests for you on that. So we've got Edwina Curry, we've got Vince Cable, and we've got much, much more as well. You're not going to want to miss it. But before all of that, ladies and gents, it's time for a quick check on your news headlines.
Thanks. I'm Polly Middlehurst with the latest GB News headlines. MPs are debating new COVID restrictions ahead of a vote this evening. Dozens of Conservatives are expected to rebel against the government's Plan B measures. Earlier, the Health Secretary announced that all 11 countries on the red travel list will be removed at 4 a.m. on Wednesday, but current testing measures will remain. Meanwhile, the Scottish First Minister says she's not asking anyone in Scotland to cancel Christmas. Nicola Sturgeon told MSPs that instead, she's asking people to limit their socialising to 3 households to combat Omicron. Lateral flow tests are unavailable through the government website for a second day running. Double jab people are being asked to take an LFT every day for 7 days if they come into contact with a positive COVID test. A mother and her partner have been found guilty over the death of 16-month-old Star Hobson. The toddler died in September last year from catastrophic injuries, which she received at her home in West Yorkshire. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill, pictured on the right, has been charged with her murder, and Star's mother, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, on the left, was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. And 2 of the UK's biggest transport firms are merging after National Express agreed to the takeover of rival Stagecoach. It's going to create a combined worth of around £1.9 billion. Together, they'll have a fleet of around 40,000 vehicles and a workforce of around 70,000 people. Those are your latest news headlines. I'm back at 5 o'clock. See you then.
Yes, afternoon, everybody. Now, it's a big week for Boris Johnson. When is it not, to be fair? And not just because of the COVID rebellion. On Thursday, there's a by-election in North Shropshire following Conservative MP Owen Paterson's resignation over allegations of sleaze. Now, our West Midlands correspondent, Belvinder Sidhu, has been meeting some of the voters who will decide the election on Thursday. Let's check it out.
Normally, obviously, as I'm a business owner, Conservatives are normally my way to go, but I am losing a lot of trust in them. I think it might be time for new leadership based on that lack of trust.
No, I was a Labour, but I'm not a Labour anymore, so I've gone on to Green, what's it called? Greenpeace, is it?
Green Party.
Yeah, Green Party.
Why have you, do you think North Shropshire's ready for change? Because the Conservatives have held this seat.
I know for years now, haven't they? Yeah, but they get in again, they always do. They always get in off the street anyway.
Well, I don't know who I'm going to vote for this time, and I'll just wait and see what happens and see what one comes up with the best ideas or whatever, and go for that.
I'll always vote Tory. Yes, well, you got to stick by them thick and thin. I don't believe in kicking anyone when they're down. I'll let him below the belt.
If they had the Christmas parties and what have you, it's wrong, because like we had to suffer last year with family. You didn't see many of the families and everything.
but I don't know. I don't trust any of them. So, I don't know.
Well, there we go. That was interesting stuff, wasn't it? A range of views, it's fair to say. And we're going to replicate that right now, because joining us is former Lib Dem leader Sir Vince Cable, former Conservative Junior Health Minister Edwina Currie, and Reform UK leader Richard Tice. What a cabal we've managed to put together here. Thank you very much, everybody. Sir Vince, I'll come to you first. Your lots have been Bucky's favourites now.
Yes, well, I mean, there is quite a lot of optimism amongst our people. I mean, I was there myself knocking on doors 10 days ago, actually before the eruption of feeling around these Christmas parties. And even then, it looked pretty good. I mean, there was quite a lot of negativity about the government. And I think to the extent to people had consolidated their alternative, they were clustering around us. A lot of it had to do with the fact that we had a good local candidate. And that seemed to weigh with people. And as you rightly said in your introduction, the bookmakers have now got us as favourites, and they stand to lose money if they get it wrong. So their views are probably more accurate than what we're likely to come up with from our own partisan standpoint.
Well, there you go. The Lib Dems, to be fair, are very good on the local doorstep, aren't they? Edwina, I'll come to you next. Now, this seat has been considered, could be considered anyway, a really good bellwether for how much sleaze or Christmas parties or allegations of jobs for the boys type stuff has actually really cut through with people. Do you think it will have had an impact?
Well, I suspect that Vince and I would probably agree on two things. The first is that the biggest vote on Thursday in North Shropshire is going to be non-views. And the odds are that the highest proportion of vote will be people who don't turn out at all. Yeah, it is a constituency that doesn't have a high turnout. It's usually about a third of the voters don't vote anyhow. And the second thing we can probably agree on is that the Labour Party is going to do quite badly. They came second last time. I can't see that happening this time at all. And it's going to be a continued problem for the leader of the official opposition in Parliament. By-elections are an opportunity for people to play games in a way, to express their dissatisfaction with all sorts of things. There'll be plenty of Tories in that constituency who will feel aggrieved at the way that they feel that their popular MP, Owen Paterson, was treated by the Prime Minister. There's plenty of people outside who say, hang on a minute, he was, this was corruption on a massive scale, as the Select Committee said. But there'll be plenty of people who, because Owen isn't the candidate, as he has been for many years, they won't vote. And that, I think, is going to skew it. But I don't think the Lib Dems should be counting their chickens towards a general election. I feel absolutely certain when it comes to a general election, not only will we win it, but we will again win another general election, not least because of the serious weaknesses of the opposition.
All right, we'll come back to you, don't worry. I must say, you've got a lovely setting behind you there as well, actually. It's quite very homely. But Richard, I'll throw over to you now. You must be hoping to make gains here now, surely, for a variety of different reasons. How do you see it panning out for your party?
It's extraordinary we're having this discussion at all, Patrick, in one of the safest Tory seats in the country. This is without question a vote on Boris Johnson, and that's how people are going to view it, Patrick. And people on the doorstep, I've been knocking on hundreds and hundreds of doors. Boris is now an electoral liability, without question. He's as bad as Corbyn 2 years ago in 2019's general election. People really do want to send a big message. There are two great local candidates. One is the Lib Dems, as Vince said. We've got a great local candidate, Kirsty Walmsley. Unfortunately, she, in her campaigning, she's ended up with COVID, but there we are. And, we're saying, look, it's a chance to send a message to Westminster. You're not happy with the status quo. Of course, essentially now the Conservatives are like the Labour Party. They're con-socialist, high tax, high regulation. We're the only party of any real Conservative values. And we think lots of the traditional Conservative voters in that rural seat will vote for Reform UK. That's our ambition. That's what we're fighting to the end for.
OK, Vince, I'll throw it back to you. I thought Edwina actually made a good point about the turnout. And, of course, we saw in Old Bexley and Sidcup, didn't we? I think it was 34% that turnout. It's almost not really an election, isn't it, really? But so what do you think about this? Because if the Lib Dems do win, surely it's just a protest vote. It doesn't necessarily you'd win it again at the next general election, does it?
It may well do. I mean, we had the last time the Conservatives were in power on their own, the end of the sort of major era, we had a whole series of by-election victories with very large Conservative majorities, and we kept on to them. I mean, we lost them eventually after the coalition, but our people sunk roots. They're very good at local campaigning and doing constituency work, and if we win, we may well hold on to it. So I wouldn't. I'm certainly not counting chickens as you suggested a few minutes ago. I mean, it's still going to be very close, but we have a good chance of winning, and it may represent a kind of bigger breakthrough in the sense that we will be seen as the challengers in a lot of Conservative-facing seats. I mean, we're clearly not going to win in many parts of the country in a general election, but if we win enough seats, we could see the end of Conservative government and maybe a hung parliament. That's certainly very plausible prospect.
All right, Vince, thank you very much. Edwina, just respond to that. I mean, one of the issues that I think is going to be a big one is look, if this does go, well, one way or the other than the Conservative Party, for example, Boris is facing what looks to be like quite a sizable rebellion this evening. Then that's followed a couple of days later by potentially a poor by-election result. Is it potentially terminal stuff for his premiership?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, in her 11 years in office, Margaret Thatcher faced very similar circumstances and still went on to win the next election. The vote tonight, the moment Wes Streeting said that the Labour Party would support it, that gave licence to anybody on the backbenches who's feeling stroppy to announce their virtue and to say they're not going to support the government. They're not all saying that they're going to vote against the government. But that's a kind of rebellion that becomes almost an issue of conscience for some people, and is something that governments have to weather. When it comes, it won't help with the by-election, of course, a couple of days later. But this is kind of classic midterm blues. What many of us are looking forward to is Boris perhaps reshuffling some of the people who work for him in the office in number 10. And trying to make sure that things actually work a little bit better. Trying to combat COVID on top of everything else is a little tricky. If everything else was running much more smoothly, the way he got it eventually to run when he was Mayor of London, then I think we could feel more relaxed and a little more confident.
Yes, I've certainly heard rumblings of things behind the scenes potentially being shaken up some point soon. Richard, look, Reform UK at least offers a genuine opposition, doesn't it? The Labour Party don't. They're waving this stuff through. There are some Tory rebels, of course, but there'll also be a lot of members of the Conservative Party who agree with him. The Lib Dems Vince, but we're on the wrong side of history when it came to Brexit. So, Richard, it's your lot with a credible opposition, isn't it?
Well, we're certainly campaigning hard on that, saying, look, send a message, you're not happy. And people are not happy, and not only with issues around Boris being a liability, and I'm convinced we're well past peak Boris, but also they're not happy with the net zero proposals, what I call net stupid, that's going to impoverish the nation and send our jobs and money to China. They're not happy with the huge increase in illegal migration across the Channel. And they're not happy with the huge waiting list in the NHS. So, many things, and indeed taxation. I mean, Tory party used to be a party of cutting taxes, not raising them to the highest level for 70 years. So there are so many reasons why this safe Tory seat is seriously under threat, and it's an extraordinary moment, Patrick. It will be very close, that is for sure. Labour are actually trying in the last few days. They suddenly realised they've made a catastrophic mistake conceding this to the Lib Dems, which again I think shows a sort of failure of strategic leadership from Keir Starmer. Who knows? I think it's going to be very, very close on the night, Patrick. Who knows? We could be into recount territory.
I demand a recount. There you go. Vince Cable, Edwina Curry and Richard Tice, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic to have all of them on board. A Lib Dem, a Tory and a Reform UK walk into a bar. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere, but I've not got time to make it. Thank you to all three of you. Well, look, I'm back after a very short break, so don't go anywhere. And I'll be going to some of your views as well, GB Views at gbnews.uk. Lots to get stuck into tonight. The overall question is, are the Conservatives right to rebel against Boris Johnson's plan for vaccine passports? Make sure you get in touch and tell us your views.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, afternoon, everybody. Now, it's eerily reminiscent of the first coronavirus lockdown, isn't it? Images shared across social media show town centres, train stations and roads almost empty after the new working from home guidance came into force. Earlier, the Association of School and College Leaders said schools across the country are seeing very severe low attendance as the Omicron variant spreads. This is actually what people in Nottingham had to say a bit earlier.
It certainly will change the way I travel. And basically keep away from other people.
I'm currently working from home because the company I work for allows us to do that, and I would prefer to do that. I won't change the way I travel. I'll always wear a mask, and I use hand sanitizer, so yeah, pretty much things will be the same.
At the moment, it's drastically changed the way I travel. I prefer to go by foot or by car. I'm not keen on public transport at the moment, but I have done it when desperate.
I just get the train from, my local train station to Nottingham every day, but it won't change the way I travel, not unless the timetables are changed or anything like that.
I wear a mask on the train, happy with the travel, I'm really still going to carry on doing it.
No one should be travelling anywhere during this pandemic.
Oh, yet again, a range of views, a solid range of views. Well, let's go live now to Nottingham and we can speak to our East Midlands reporter, the wonderful Will Hollis. Thank you very much, Will. So what's going on where you are then?
Good evening. Yeah, the train station, people have been coming and going. It doesn't seem to be any quieter than I know this train station to be. Just to give you a bit of an idea, before the pandemic, 2018, 2019, around 8 million passengers came through this station. Obviously, it's much fewer people have been travelling during the pandemic, but East Midlands Rail, who operates this station, was seeing numbers start to get back to where they were. And while we don't know the exact numbers or the data regarding how busy this station has been since the Plan B announcements came into place and Omicron reared its head from where it was first discovered in South Africa, We still don't know what that data is going to be, but the people that I've spoken to who work in this station say that it does seem to be a lot quieter, and it is reminiscent of that time as we led into that first national lockdown. As I say, no data yet, but one thing the Rail Delivery Group, which works as part of a membership group for network operators around the country, said that rail companies will continue to support the government's effort to tackle coronavirus by encouraging passengers who can't work from home to wear a face mask. The part about travel that really has the effect is whether people are going to be coming into work. Many people have the option to work from home now, while some people do need to come into work. And how that affects business is still yet to be seen, but the East Midlands Chamber is calling for greater support from the Treasury for businesses. We know things like the furlough scheme and VAT reductions were essential to getting people through the earlier parts of the pandemic, and businesses here really do want to see that support. What will happen over the next few days, weeks and months as this Plan B and any future potential lockdowns play out, we're still yet to see.
Thank you very, very much, Will. Good stuff there. And actually, I used to get off at that train station all the time because I went to uni in Nottingham, so I recognise those exact doors behind you. So thank you very much for taking me on a little trip down memory lane, as well as informing the nation. Will Hollis there, our East Midlands reporter, just whizzing you through what's going on in that part of the world. It's a mixed bag, wasn't it, there, of views, I think? And that was quite interesting. Some people saying we shouldn't be travelling anywhere right now, we need to lock ourselves away. Quite a lot of other people just continuing with their normal lives, it would seem, as well. And I think that's actually quite representative of where we are as a country at the moment. But there have been hours-long queues for booster jabs for a second day today in England. Meanwhile, Downing Street has insisted there is significant testing capacity for COVID, despite the public reporting difficulties in finding lateral flow and PCR tests. From today, the double-jabbed are advised to take a lateral flow test every single day for 7 days if they come into contact with someone with coronavirus. Well, let's talk to the NHS GP, Dr. Khaki now. And thank you very much. There he is. Good stuff. How's the system holding up in your view? Do you think we're being lied to when it comes to the amount of testing available?
I mean, it's a huge challenge, isn't it? We know that as we see the numbers creeping up, as we see the new variant taking hold, people are worried, understandably, and as you showed in the last segment, you know, people are making some adjustments to their lives to try to accommodate for that. So, of course, the testing demands will be increased, but I think we should be okay going forward. And I think really the key point is, in some ways, really encouraging news to see so many people trying to get a booster. That's really promising.
Yeah, just you've led me, as if by magic, you've led me directly on to my next question here, because we can just see on the screen there quite a few queues, really, and I know just anecdotal evidence as well from things I've seen on Twitter and members of the office or whatever, that there have been very, very, very long queues for some of these booster jabs. So what can people do if they are struggling to get a booster because of the queues? Are there ample booster stations, or do they just have to wait it out like a ride at Alton Towers?
Yeah, it's like a very strange type of ride at Alton Towers, isn't it? I think the key point here is there are enough boosters. The commitment, the aim is to get 1 million by the end of this month. So the vaccines are available. Really, it's about a bit of patience and a little bit of waiting. Yesterday, I was helping some patients book onto the website, and yes, there is a delay. But when you do get through after 3 or 4 minutes online, you can book a booster, and there's a lot of availability around where you are. So actually, there's a lot of availability. And I would say to people, don't be discouraged. Do wait that out, because it is so important, especially as we are trying to get through this pandemic. The booster really does, to reiterate the advice and the many messages we've said, represent the best way out of this pandemic for us and protection. We still don't really know what this new variant will be like, how dangerous it is, how much it could impact people. We do know that it seems to be spreading a bit quicker than the Delta variant that was causing so much havoc last year, but we're not quite sure about the symptoms. So whilst we're still in that uncertainty, do go and get your booster.
Dr. Khaki there, thank you very much. An NHS GP. Good luck, Dr. Mo, as well, as no doubt you'll be part of our big effort to try and We jab a million people a day by New Year's Eve or something like that, isn't it? So thank you very much for that. Right, well, time for a short break now, ladies and gentlemen. See you in a moment.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's talk.
Yes, well, hello and welcome. If you just joined the afternoon agenda, I'm Patrick Christie's, and this show is, of course, all about you. Discussion, debates, and the things that should be on your agenda. So still to come this hour, very sad story, this one. Toddler Star Hobson was murdered by her mother's partner, a jury has found. After another horrific case of child abuse, we'll speak to a social work expert on the lessons learned. Hopefully they have actually been learned this time, because it seems to keep happening, doesn't it? Malta apparently becomes the first country in Europe to legalise cannabis for personal use, leading to calls for the same thing to happen here. We'll hear the arguments for and against on that. And ahead of the crucial vote in the House of Commons tonight, we couldn't ignore this one, could we, ladies and gentlemen? This evening, we need to talk about vaccine passports. Are Conservative MPs right to vote against the government? That's the agenda for the next hour, but what's on yours? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or of course tweet me at gbnews. First though, it's time for your latest headlines.
Hello, I'm Polly Middlehurst, and this is your GB News at 5 o'clock. The Health Secretary has announced all 11 countries on the UK's travel red list will be removed from 4 a.m. on Wednesday as Omicron takes hold across the country. Arrivals will still need to take pre-departure tests and a day 2 PCR. MPs are currently debating new COVID restrictions ahead of a vote this evening. As you've been hearing, dozens of Conservatives are expected to rebel against the government's Plan B measures, including the wearing of face masks, mandatory vaccines for all NHS staff and COVID passports in England. The measures are, however, expected to pass because the Prime Minister has the support of the Labour Party, which backs tighter controls.
But it's the fact that Omicron hospitalisations are low that means it is now the best time to act. And we've seen during previous waves, we've already seen this, the lag between infections and hospitalisations, it's about 2 weeks. When infections are rising so quickly, we're likely to see a substantial rise in hospitalisations before any measure is starting to have an impact.
Meanwhile, the First Minister of Scotland is advising people there to limit socialising to a maximum of 3 households during Christmas. Nicola Sturgeon told MSPs that she's not asking anyone to cancel the holiday period, but says they must take Omicron seriously. She also confirmed 2 people are in hospital with the new variant.
Turning to Christmas Day specifically, or Christmas Eve or Boxing Day, or whenever you have your main family celebration, we are not asking you to cancel or change your plans, and we are not proposing limits on the size of household gatherings. Keeping your celebrations as small as your family circumstances allow is sensible too. Make sure everyone in your gathering is vaccinated and has done a test in advance. Keep rooms ventilated and follow strict hygiene rules.
People are still, though, having problems accessing lateral flow tests for a second day running in the UK. They're still unavailable via the government website. Double jab people have been asked to take a lateral flow test every day for 7 days if they come into contact with a positive COVID case. The government's appealing for tens of thousands of volunteers to help with the booster jab programme. It's announced a target of nearly 1 million jabs a day to get all eligible adults vaccinated by the end of December. But the former NHS Trust chairman Roy Lilly told GB News that's unrealistic.
Just to suddenly on Sunday night say, oh, listen, and by the way, on Monday we're going to do 1 million vaccinations. Oh, no, we're not. We've got to recruit the volunteers with the estates people who've got to sort out the locations, there's security, there's clinical waste, there's logistics. I mean, this is a big operation, and I'm not saying the NHS isn't up for it. It is. But if you simply do the numbers, the carryover of the unvaccinated into the next day, it's just statistically impossible to do by the end of the month.
The Prime Minister has described the murder of 16-month-old Star Hobson as shocking and heartbreaking. Boris Johnson added that children must be protected from barbaric crimes and ensures lessons are learned. Savannah Brockhill, pictured on the right, has been charged with the child's murder. Her partner and Star's mother, Frankie Smith, seen on the left, has been found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. The toddler died from catastrophic injuries received at a West Yorkshire home in September last year. Star's great-grandfather says he saw worrying signs of abuse.
My blood used to run cold. I just had a horrible, uneasy feeling about the situation. We even called the car Christine after a horror film in the early 80s. And then Anita used to say, you do realise little Star's going to finish up a star in the sky. Kept seeing Frankie bruised, and it was just like a domestic relationship.
Star's great-grandfather. Now, 2 of the UK's biggest transport firms are merging after National Express agreed to the takeover of rival Stagecoach. It's going to create a combined worth of around £1.9 billion. Together, they'll have a fleet of around 40,000 vehicles and a workforce of around 70,000 people. You're up to date. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
Hello everyone, you're with the Afternoon Agenda, and today we really need to talk about vaccine passports. It's an absolutely huge day for Britain, this. It's a seismic day with potentially very large ramifications, both for Boris Johnson and indeed us as people. There's lots to get stuck into. There's going to be about 80-odd Conservative Party rebels as far as we understand it. But another little spanner in the works, another little something to keep us all interested as this evening continues, is that actually apparently quite a lot of members of Parliament have now tested positive for coronavirus. This means that a lot of them will be self-isolating and not actually voting. Now, if it really is down to what Sir Alex Ferguson used to call squeaky bum time for Boris Johnson, that could actually have quite a big impact, so it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. Boris Johnson is any minute now, as we understand it, going to be talking to the Backbench 1922 committee. Now, he's already been copping it from them for quite a long time, as allegations of sleaze and potentially dodgy Christmas parties and goodness knows what else have been dogging him recently. And this is going to have a big, big impact. The noise that I'm hearing is that a lot of these Conservative MPs who are rebels are not really going to go anywhere, as in they're not going to budge. They're going to stick to their guns and vote against it. They'll have already had the phone calls from Boris Johnson, they'll have already had the phone calls from the whips, and they'll have already decided not to move on that. Even if Boris Johnson does get it through, as is expected, it actually could present, anyway, a total sword of Damocles hanging over his head from now until he decides to walk away or is indeed pushed, because once people get the taste for rebellion, they actually normally quite like it. But there's a lot else going on as well. It might just seem, anyway, like voting for vaccine passports today is a one-time thing. I think there's a very real case that if we vote for vaccine passports today, we will have them for the rest of our lives. Now, I spoke to a couple of MPs earlier on in the show, which you may have caught. One was pretty open to that idea, one was against it. I'll tell you why I think we're always going to have vaccine passports. It's because we're always going to have COVID, apparently. So I very much doubt that we're going to end up in a situation where once they've been voted through, once that very hard-fought vote has actually been won, especially off the back of what is quite a sizable rebellion, that they're ever going to rescind on that. So this, for the rest of our lives, could be a thing. Now, there is another area as well, Omicron itself. Was Boris Johnson right to do this and to take these measures? Was Sajid Javid right to take these measures for this particular strain of the virus? Now, it's very early days, and touch wood, though, everything seems to be relatively OK when it comes to Omicron so far. Yes, it's short-term data coming out of South Africa, but what that appears to show is that it is a mild version, highly transmissible, but relatively mild. And actually, that could be a very good thing for us because, fingers crossed, it could help to act as almost like a vaccine booster. I don't know if you've had a chance to digest this yet, but it looks as though countries are going to be taken off our red list as well, which could be very good news for anyone who's decided to book a little bit of winter sun. But there is another thing taking place at the moment, and it is holding some MPs back. And I know this personally from voting for Boris Johnson's plans this evening. In fact, it's turning them the other way. It's the notion that may well be true, it may well be not, that Boris Johnson actually really made such a big deal of Omicron when he did to get other things out of the papers, to get those parties out of the papers, to get allegations of sleaze, to get allegations of very, very, very pricey wallpaper off the front pages and out of people's mouths. And if that is the case, then people won't vote for things like vaccine passports if that is the only reason they're being asked to vote on it. But there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure that you keep your views coming in. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Tweet us as well at GB News. Make sure that you get in touch and tell us, would you vote for vaccine passports? Why? Why not? Let me know. Yeah, so that was a little whiz-through for you there, but as we understand, there could be around 80 Conservative MPs voting against plans for vaccine passports. You will know that by now, of course, unless you've been living on the moon with your fingers in your ears. And our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is live for us again on College Green. Darren, you've been a very busy man today. What's the latest?
Well, let's bring you up to date with some of the science, first of all, and reflecting what you just said. It's not necessarily always or is all good news in some regards. Infection figures out tonight saying there were 59,610 cases recorded in the UK yesterday. Now, we heard, of course, from Sajid Javid yesterday, Health Secretary, saying that we could have around 200,000 daily infections by today. Why the differentiation in that figure? Well, to a large degree is because there is a lag between people getting infected, then showing symptoms, then getting the test, then getting the results. So that figure is rising, and frankly, it's rising quite quickly. So much so that the Labour Party tonight have been briefed by Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, at which one MP said that the briefing was chilling, and that the message essentially from that briefing from Chris Whitty was that the brakes are off when it comes to Omicron, i.e. it is spreading incredibly quickly. Additionally, there is much speculation tonight, Patrick, that Chris Whitty himself might well hold a press conference or a statement to the public about the real concerns now at the growth of this virus and this variant. Let's be clear, you're right in suggesting, of course, that the evidence from South Africa so far appears to suggest that it is milder, maybe even much milder than the Delta variant. That is clearly good news. The bad news is the transmissibility. And listening to scientists and science commentators all day, they say if it is substantially more transmissible, that is in the end not good news. Whether it's mild or not, it doesn't really matter as much, because the absolute number of cases will mean that even if it's relatively small, the number of people needing hospitalizations, because the peak will happen so quickly and so big that you will have an awful lot of hospitalizations at the one time. That is the message that Boris Johnson and others in government tonight, as you say, are trying to make to Conservative MPs in that place behind me to try and back some of these measures, though you have to conclude that if this is right, and I say if this is right, if Chris Whitty is as concerned as he is, the Plan B restrictions may not be enough. And we have to remember the government repeatedly, while they've said that Plan B is all right for the time being, have not said that they're not willing to impose further restrictions ahead of Christmas. You look at what's happened in Scotland, where Nicola Sturgeon has today said that they're going to bring back in social distancing for shops, restaurants and bars, and they're asking people to limit the social gatherings before Christmas. Could England end up there? Could Wales and Northern Ireland? It is entirely possible, again, if Chris Whitty's advice to the government is as strong as it sounds like it is this afternoon.
No, look, Darren, thank you very much. It's very much new news, that, so it's good to actually be able to get it out as quickly as we possibly can. And yes, gosh, well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed it turns out not to be true, I suppose. But there we are. Darren McCaffrey, thank you very, very much, our political editor there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you just heard it here right now, that it does look as though the cases are indeed jumping significantly, although they didn't hit the 200,000 mark that Sajid Javid was warning about yesterday. They're up to around 69,000, and I suppose Chris Whitty clearly has apparently addressed the Labour Party. His advice to them has been chilling. Of course, he's known to have given a few people the chills over the course of this pandemic, it's fair to say. But will this actually now have any tangible difference at the vote tonight? Will Conservative MPs, some Tory rebels, be looking at this now and thinking, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to change my mind? But joining us right now is Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesperson and MP for Edinburgh West. It's Christine Jardine. Thank you very much, Christine. I'm assuming you might have been able to hear what our political editor Darren McCaffrey was saying there. Huge jump in the cases of Omicron in this country right now. Does that give you the chills?
Well, I actually heard it from Chris Whitty because I was in the briefing that he talked about, so I actually heard it from Chris Whitty. And yes, it is concerning. We do know that there's a range of opinions about the South African bug, and what Chris Whitty was saying was that he was giving us the sort of the middle road steer, which is that it is much more transmissible, that we do need that booster to protect ourselves from it wherever possible, and that there's no evidence yet about whether or not it's any less, what's the word I'm looking for? It's any less dangerous or more dangerous. We can't tell because it's the way it's developed in South Africa might be different from the way it's developed here. But there has been a jump in the numbers, and we need to give this every attention and do everything we can to ensure that we minimise the risk and that as many people as possible are vaccinated, have their booster jab to protect them.
Yeah, OK. Do you think this will have changed Conservative rebels' minds, though? Do you think that this will now have a shift?
Well, the thing is, from what Chris Whitty was telling us today, that vaccine passports that say that you've had both of your injections will be absolutely no use to anybody. They're even less significant in tackling COVID-19 than we thought before, because that you have to have 3, and it's a lateral flow test is going to be much more useful in telling whether or not you have any protection. And I think that it's not a question of whether they should vote against the government, as you've been saying. I think it's a question of whether or not they should do what's right. And what's right is to vote against vaccine passports, because they will not bring any benefit whatsoever. They will not protect us in any way from Omicron, and the industry tell us they're unworkable.
Yeah, so obviously the news of Chris Whitty tonight has absolutely had no impact whatsoever on your view that vaccine passports should not be a thing in this country.
No, because what Chris Whitty said tonight is very worrying. But the answer is not vaccine passports. The answer is face masks. The answer is working from home. The answer is social distancing. It's being careful. And we also the government now needs to step up and support the industries that are going to be badly affected by this. The small businesses, the family firms who are already struggling, have built up debt through COVID-19, and who are now going to be hit again by cancellation of Christmas parties.
All right.
These sort of things.
Absolutely. Well, look, while I've got you, I hope you don't mind, slightly off topic, I would like to just ask you a bit about what you think might happen in North Shropshire. Liberal Democrats are the bookies' favourites.
Yeah, they are. We are, and it's going to be really close. I hate predicting these things because, you know, tempt fate, but it is going to be really close. And I think what we're seeing is that the people in North Shropshire are fed up being taken for granted by this Conservative government. There are issues there which need addressed, which Helen Morgan, who's the Liberal Democrat candidate, has been addressing. That, you know, the ambulance service is under immense pressure. There are GP waiting times. There are all these problems. And Sajid Javid hasn't, you know, paid any attention to what the health board have been saying. So what we see is that people are fed up, being taken for granted. Farmers are very disappointed with how they've been treated as well. And they see in the Liberal Democrats a party who, you know, have a very strong local network of councillors, and we go out there and we listen to people all year round. We don't just turn up when there's an election on. We're out there all year round listening to what people have to say, standing up for them in Parliament. And I think it shows how unhappy Conservative voters are with this government.
Christine, thank you very much as always. Christine Jardine there, of course, Liberal Democrat MP. Right, now it's time to whiz over to Alex Proud, who is an entrepreneur and a founder of the Proud Group, who, I wonder how he came with that name, who run cabaret performances and burlesque shows. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So this is a concerning time now for you, surely. Where are you at on this vaccine passport debate? Because we have just had some news through there, haven't we, about the amount of cases that we've seen, the jump, the spike in Omicron cases.
Well, I mean, I'm in the rare position of, for once, being able to try and say the news agenda is interesting. Yeah, the cases jumped by 5,000 from yesterday. But interestingly, the statistic that some would say is far more important, deaths dropped by 30 on the same day, and hospitalizations went up by a very minuscule amount. And I think the frustration is that we always jump on whatever the worst figure is or the worst prediction is, and no one ever cautions a little bit of common sense and calming down. Let's see how those death rates and those hospitalizations go. You know, Boris goes, one person died yesterday from Omicron. Well, did he die from Omicron, or did he come into hospital with something else and also have it? And how many people died in car crashes yesterday? I'm pretty sure all of us are going to get in a cab on our way out, hopefully, to a restaurant or dinner or the theatre, who has a bit of common sense. We're incredibly nervous, we're incredibly angry, because we're yet again going to be hung out to dry by the government to cover Boris's inept competency, because he looks like he's doing something. The fact of the matter is, as was just rightly said, that the government's own civil servants are telling us that vaccine passports will make a negligible difference to transmission rates. And our sector, the hospitality sector, during the various bits we were on lockdown and they were counting, was responsible for sub 2% of infection rates. So none of this makes any sense. The bit that does make sense is the 70 billion a year we put into the economy and the 3 million people we employ, and the fact that we are carrying huge debt from being treated badly last time. So to say I'm angry would be a ridiculous understatement. And also say I'm angry with the news agenda being set in such a dramatic way because it sells newspapers. Even GBNews, who have, been incredibly balanced. The way you're reporting these figures, let's report all three figures. Hospitalizations are not up by much, deaths are down, and infections are up by 5,000, but it's a mild infection. Can I say one last thing? When I first read about the South African, all the scientists were saying the death rates there will be higher because of the vast prevalence of HIV and malaria. And if death rates are low in South Africa, it is almost certain they will be even lower in a very healthy country like Britain. So again, can I put that to bed? Because that seems like speculation the wrong way yet again.
Yeah, no, I think you make a series of very, very interesting points, actually, and some very good ones as well. It was very interesting for me personally as well, because I kind of heard this stuff for the first time when our political editor mentioned it to me. And in the last few minutes, some more information has actually come to light. Yes, of course, those cases have gone up. The UK records 59,610 new COVID cases, the highest daily total since early January. But you're right, I say only, of course, any death is a tragedy, but 30 people have died. So there's not necessarily that correlation there, although it can be a lag Also, just a little bit of something else coming to me now. Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrats leader, has just said that he is tested positive and he will be self-isolating for 10 days. So one would assume that he won't be voting in this either. So if this was you now and you were running the country, would you presumably just say no to vaccine passports? Would you be encouraging people to get the booster jab as much as they are? Would you be saying any kind of rhetoric along the lines of Boris Johnson? What would you do as PM now?
Well, I mean, I think what annoys me is what I've been saying in interview after interview for the last 3 months is where was the government advertising campaign on boosters 3 months ago? We knew from our scientists that variants were going to come at us. They're going to keep coming at us. You know, whether we like it or not, I hate booster jabs. I've had one. I hate injections. I'm going to keep on having them because if that's what keeps us open, then we all go and have our boosters. And it might be we have to have these things every 6 months. I hope the science is telling us that each time a new variant comes, it will be milder and milder, which is what we were told would happen. So why we're all getting hysterical about this, I'm not quite sure. But what annoys me is why am I, the hospitality sector, paying for the fact that government didn't push the booster campaign 2 or 3 months ago when it could? It had the boosters. It just didn't push it because it seemed like it wasn't important. And that angers me that we're now, yet again, paying for the fact the government didn't do that 3 months ago. I think right now, caution, common sense. Let's have emergency measures ready. Let's announce what they are. But say what I find really angers me is why can't the government ever say, if hospitalization rates get to X and death rates get to X, that is when they will start? Why are we always left to the hysteria of the various professors who seem to do very well from the profile they get from being on the media all the time? Why don't we just have some pure science? Here are the figures. This is what happens when you get to this figure. This is what happens. Lockdown will occur when we get to this rate of hospitalizations. That would make a load of sense. It would be black and white, and we could all stop arguing about the fact that Boris is self-evidently doing this to cover up for his enormous trouble and the fact that the Tory party are probably going to chop his head off pretty soon.
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Thank you for your input as well. And good luck to you as well. It's going to be a very testing time. Hopefully, you can manage to weather it and continue. Alex Proud there, of course, entrepreneur and founder of the Proud Group, who run cabaret performances and burlesque shows. Well, now time for something a little bit different, it's fair to say. Here's some news to make motorists' eyes water. Yes, the average price per litre of petrol is 3 times more now than it cost in 2019. So based on last week's prices, the Times newspaper reports that a litre of petrol is 146.9 pence, while diesel is at 150.27p. Fewer motorists on the roads is having an impact on prices, apparently. Plus, analysts, yet another way cyclists are ruining my life. Anyway, plus analysts say that recent acquisitions of Asda for £6.8 billion will have an impact on the price of fuel. That's because Asda used to aggressively compete with other supermarkets over cheap fuel to drive customers to their forecourts. Well, joining me now is Chief Marketing Analyst for Scope Markets, James Hughes. Thank you very much for joining us. So, look, what sort of impact will this have on customers' pockets going forward? It looks like it's becoming almost unaffordable, well, it might be one day anyway, to actually drive a car.
Yeah, well, it's not going to have a good effect, that's for sure. And, of course, it's the same with supermarkets that we always get when we talk about food prices. It's competition. Competition is what drives prices, and price wars is what drives them lower. And, of course, what one of the key things is, and what we all do in this country, is we drive around and we go to the supermarkets for our petrol because typically they tend to be the cheapest that you can find. And Asda historically was the cheapest. But what's happened is they've been taken over. They were taken over by EG Group, and when they were taken over, it was a key business decision by the owners of the company to not fight that price war, to not aggressively go in with fuel prices, which is why there's, within the article you were talking about, the Times article you were talking about, there's actually a quote from someone who didn't want to be named at another supermarket that said they were incredibly happy when this takeover happened because they knew the price war wouldn't continue, and that all of the supermarkets could then raise the prices of their fuel. So it's not good for motorists, of course, but it's a huge situation and a massively tough one when you consider that inflation in this country is still really pushing itself higher.
This gets raised like it is now, like it is in various news articles. You wonder what kind of PR damage this might do to Asda, actually, because if people realise that their decision to not compete at the pump has had an impact on their pockets, all of a sudden you might be more inclined to shop elsewhere. I do want to ask you something that I joked about there, but never joke when it's about cyclists, because the Twitter storm that comes afterwards is mega. But it is a bit of it down to people doing cycling or e-scooters or whatever. Fewer people driving, prices go up.
Well, you can say that about a few things. Of course, you have cyclists, yes, being one of those things. But of course, if you look at the lockdown situation, if you look at actually what's happening in the last couple of weeks, working from home, fewer cars on the roads means that there's actually less fuel being bought by a lot of people. And of course, that causes demand issues. And of course, the market it's a supply and demand market, of course. And if we look at how that then affects the oil prices and what we see in oil. And there is a situation that continues and really does carry over from lockdowns, really, where that we start to see demand pick up in oil markets, and that's fuel, of course, and jet fuel and all sorts of different things. And that then fluctuates the oil price. And when the oil price goes up, you tend to get that handed onto you at the pumps. But when that oil price then stabilizes and comes down, of course, it doesn't necessarily tend to be handed back to you in the same way. Oil prices and fuel prices tend to go up, but the fuel prices don't really ever seem to come down with it.
Yeah. Good stuff, James. Thank you very much. James Hughes there, Chief Market Analyst for Scope Market and an economist as well. Well, look, let's take a quick break and get a check on that weather, but I'll see you shortly.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast. There'll be a lot of cloud during the next 24 hours, shrouding the hills of the western UK and keeping things mild. There'll be some rain as well, but that will tend to ease later as this area of high pressure moves in for the rest of the week and begins to properly settle things down widely. Before that happens, these weather fronts and these tightly packed isobars across northern parts of the UK bring wind and rain for Tuesday evening. Some heavier rain at times for the northwest Highlands, but through the night, the area of cloud and rain across Scotland sinks south. It clears from the far north and northwest, but it edges into Northern Ireland, parts of northern England as well. It stays cloudy across southern areas, but through this slice of central UK, clearer spells and perhaps a few pockets of fog first thing. A chilly start here as well, and once the fog clears, plenty of sunshine emerging across parts of North and East Wales, the Midlands, eastern England. Also turning brighter to the north of the Central Belt, some decent sunshine here and less windy compared to Tuesday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle, more persistent damp weather for parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northwest England. And this area of cloud and outbreaks of rain starts to move north once again on Wednesday evening, pushing into the rest of Scotland eventually overnight. Meanwhile, it stays mostly cloudy across Wales, southern and southwest England. But for the Midlands, eastern England, southern Scotland, clear spells, which will lead to, in some places, frost and even fog to begin things on Thursday. Once any fog clears, though, the best of any sunny spells will be across eastern Scotland, southern Scotland, northern and eastern England. Generally cloudy skies elsewhere. The rain in the far north of Scotland eases through the day so that by the afternoon actually many places are dry, but it will turn a bit colder. High pressure is extending across the whole of the UK on Thursday and Friday. It will bring a lot of cloud, but it will also turn things colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back, everyone. The show's absolutely flown by so far, hasn't it? Well, you are, of course, watching the afternoon agenda with me, Patrick Christie's, filling in for the wonderful Alex Phillips. But now it's time for a quick check on those headlines.
Good evening, I'm Polly Middlehurst and here are your latest GB News headlines. MPs are debating new COVID restrictions ahead of a vote this evening. Dozens of Conservatives are expected to rebel against the government's Plan B measures. Earlier, the Health Secretary announced that all 11 countries on the travel red list will be removed from 4 a.m. on Wednesday, but current testing measures will remain. Meanwhile, Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she's not asking anyone in Scotland to cancel Christmas. She told MSPs that instead she's asking people to limit their socialising to 3 households to combat Omicron. Lateral flow tests are unavailable, though, through the government website for a second day in a row. Double jab people are being asked to take an LFT every day for 7 days if they come into contact with a positive COVID case. And the Prime Minister has described the murder of 16-month-old Star Hobson in West Yorkshire as shocking and heartbreaking. Savannah Brockhill, pictured on the right of the photograph coming up, has been charged with her murder. Her partner, Star's mother, Frankie Smith, there it is, seen on the left, has been found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. And 2 of the UK's biggest transport firms are merging after National Express agreed to the takeover of rival Stagecoach. It's going to create a combined worth of around £1.9 billion, and together they'll have a fleet of around 40,000 vehicles with a workforce of 70,000 people. You're up to date. I'm back at the top of the hour.
Yes, hello everybody. Now, of course, it's eerily reminiscent, isn't it, of that first coronavirus lockdown. People everywhere are basically queuing up for their booster jabs now. I don't know about you, but anecdotal evidence from what I'm seeing anyway is that the numbers of people taking tubes, taking trains, frankly, sometimes in town centres or city centres as well, is down. Masks even outside a lot of the time now. Train stations, of course, and roads have been almost empty in various different parts of the country. This is because of the new working from home guidance. I think also a bit of fear, really, isn't it, about where we are with Omicron. Well, earlier, the Association of School and College Leaders said that schools across the country are seeing very severe low attendance as the Omicron variant spreads as well. Well, I believe that we can go live now to Nottingham. Back to Nottingham. So good we got him twice. It's time for our East Midlands reporter now, Will Hollis. And Will, is this having a big impact on transport in your area?
Yes, it does appear so. While it's kind of rush hour here, people are coming in and out of the station. Just to give you a bit of an idea, before the pandemic, 2018-19, around 8 million people, passengers, used this station throughout the year. And right now, visibly, as you say, you can see some effect. But the people that I've been speaking to who work inside of Nottingham train station that say that they are seeing a massive effect, a drop in the amount of people that are using the station. While the data isn't there, and it's not readily available right now, visually you can certainly see that there is some effect. Just to give you a bit of an idea of how these Plan B restrictions, so things like masks and as of tomorrow the COVID passport, how that is affecting travel. This is what the rail delivery group that speaks for network rail companies across the country. The rail companies will continue to support the government's effort to tackle coronavirus by encouraging passengers who can't work from home to wear a face covering unless they're exempt. Yeah, just to give you a bit of an idea, it does seem that the passenger numbers are dropping, but how quickly and how much of an effect we will see over this period of time when you legally can travel and will be able to legally travel for the foreseeable future for work, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens.
We are. Will, thank you very much, and thank you very much for hanging around in the cold for us as well. Will Hollis, our East Midlands reporter. Right now, just be warned, this is a very disturbing story. A woman has been found guilty of murdering her partner's 16-month-old daughter after months of physical abuse. Star Hobson suffered a cardiac arrest and died in hospital in September last year after Savannah Brockhill inflicted catastrophic injuries on the poor little girl. Star's mother, Frankie Smith, was also convicted at Bradford Crown Court of causing or allowing her death. Both women will be sentenced tomorrow. Well, joining us now is Dr. Ray Jones, a professor of social work at Kingston University and a practising social worker. Ray, look, this is obviously a catastrophically awful case. It does also come very closely after the case of Arthur Lavinjo Hughes as well, who sadly died in relatively similar circumstances, at least. What's going on here? You know, is this just a case of, you know, essentially very, very evil people, or is the social care system falling, the social work system failing?
Well, it's certainly another instance with Arthur's death and the criminal trial last week. We had one last week as well, of people doing really horrific, as you say, evil things to children. And these are not unique occurrences, but they are exceptional. And that's why, to be honest, it's on the news in the way it is today. And there is some issues in terms of context about this, which it's worth reminding ourselves about. And first of all, both of these terrible killings took place during the lockdown last year, at a time when children were less seen, schools were closed, and people were not seeing children out and about in the way they were before. And there were some restrictions on workers getting out to see children as well because of the high rate of infection. So that was a part of the context which relates both to the killing of Arthur and to the killing of Star. But there's a longer context as well. And that context is we've had over 10 years now of very significant cuts in those services, which might be there to help families, but also importantly to protect children. Fewer health visitors, fewer police officers within communities, and social workers, I have to say, run ragged. And what I fear may have happened in relation to Star is that, and her family, her relatives were ringing the alarm bells, and all credit to them. They did all that they could do. But when those alarm bells were rung, the people who were hearing the alarm bells were probably, if it's anywhere like the rest of the country in Bradford, trying to close work down very quickly to take on the new work coming in. And as a consequence of that, if you don't have time to find out really what's happening, and when you go and see what's in front of you, it doesn't look as bad as you might have thought, you close that work down to take on the new work coming in. I fear that may have happened in this instance.
Possibly then, in your view, not just this instance. How big is the crisis, do you think? How deep does this kind of thing run? How many, obviously you can't put an exact figure on it, but you know, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of children potentially in a similar position?
Well, at any one time, there's over 400,000 children in contact with Children's Social Services in England, 400,000. The number of child protection investigations, those instances where there's concerns about the safety and welfare of children, and social workers, sometimes with police officers, go out to find out what's happening, Those have gone up in terms of how many in a year, from 89,000 just over 10 years ago to over 200,000 today. And within that number, the danger is, the difficulty is, we miss the children that need that special attention. Most of the children where there's child protection concerns, there's a bit over 50,000 children a year with child protection plans in England. Most of those children are a cause of concern because of chronic neglect. They're not getting the care that they should be getting. But in terms of what happened to Star, what happened to Arthur, this was about real violence to children. And that's relatively rare, but it's sometimes difficult to spot where that is happening amongst the bigger numbers.
I can imagine. Dr. Ray Jones there, thank you very, very much for coming on and talking about that particular topic. Very difficult one to talk about, but certainly there was a lot of expertise there in that interview, wasn't there? So obviously a social work professor at Kingston University and a practising social worker himself, really highlighting a few different issues there. The lockdown, yes, had an impact. I think we can all accept the idea that there were children right up and down the country who were trapped with very abusive people. It was also harder potentially to spot if they weren't going to school or they weren't finally leaving the house, they weren't maybe seeing other relatives, but also a combination of that and cuts in the social work system. Devastating stuff. Well, look, it's time for a quick break now. I'll be back with you shortly.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, more than 10,000 women who took abortion pills at home required hospital treatment due to the side effects between April 2020 and September 2021. The evidence comes after organisation CARE made 85 Freedom of Information requests to NHS trusts across the country. The report states that 1 in 17 women who used the pills at home in 2020 needed hospital treatment, and it raises serious questions over the safety of these DIY abortion pills. Well, joining me now is co-chair of the British Society of Abortion Care Providers, Dr. Jonathan Lord. Thank you very much. I'm also joined as well by Emily Milne, an anti-abortion campaigner. Emily, I'll start with you. What's your initial reaction, anyway, to those figures that have just come out there?
I mean, you know, it's just very, very horrifying to hear that women's lives are in danger with these pills, that women have to seek, so many women have had to seek hospital treatment after taking these pills by post. You know, these complications are arising after discharge, they're done at home, so women don't have sort of access immediately to care as they would normally. It's just sort of just a terrible a terrible situation all around, really, and it's common as well. That's actually very common. 1 in 17 is a non-negligible amount of women who are needing treatment because of this, this failure of these pills. So I think it's sort of just all round terrible, really.
Dr. Jonathan Lord, I've got to put that to you, really. I mean, 1 in 17 is a shocking number to the point where it almost looks like it should be illegal.
Well, look at it the other way round. So it means that 16 out of 17 women, if we accept those figures, and the way they extracted them is quite odd, but if we take those figures as true, it means that 16 out of 17 women were able to have an abortion safely in the privacy of their own home and without needing any surgery. So the complications we're talking about are almost all very minor. They're more of a nuisance and troublesome. And yes, it does mean that we do need to review some of them a second time. But I say the vast majority are just able to have an abortion safely at home. And if there are problems, we'll arrange to see them on a planned basis in our clinic and make sure that we can help them out.
Would you be personally happy, I don't know what your personal circumstances are, by the way, but with someone close to you taking one of these pills, Dr. Jonathan?
Absolutely, and this is nothing new. This has been the mainstay of abortion care in the NHS for well over 10 years now. So early medical abortions at home, there were 172,000 last year. It is a very common need, and although those needing an abortion could decide if they wanted to have a surgical procedure instead, last year 88% decided that they'd rather have the tablets, and it is a perfectly valid choice, and as I say, one that hundreds of thousands of women unfortunately need to make every year.
I suppose as long as these figures get out there and, if indeed they are correct, I've got no way of knowing really whether or not they're absolutely spot on, of course. There's people that did, that ferreted around and got this information. But I suppose as long as women know, then they've got a right to put whatever they want in their bodies, haven't they?
Well, yes, I completely agree. And then the key thing is to give them accurate information.
Sorry, I was throwing that one over to Emily, actually. Apologies, Emily.
Sorry.
I mean, I don't actually think that 1 in 17 is a very good statistic, especially for something that happens so commonly, especially for something that, as rightly said, is very unfortunate that women feel like they need to have recourse to this pill. That I think I wouldn't want anyone that I know or love to have a 1 in 17 chance of ending up in hospital. I wouldn't consider it a mere nuisance either, to have to go to hospital and possibly to have extra surgery and, to continue bleeding or have hemorrhaging after that as well. I don't actually think that it's just a nuisance as being described by the gentleman there. I think that's sort of a very anti-woman kind of thing to say. It's not very pro-women's healthcare there to sort of disregard the things that we go through as being a nuisance or something that we just have to deal with.
OK, well, tell you what, come back to that then. Dr. Jonathan?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's not necessarily needing to go to hospital. So some abortion care is delivered in hospital, and therefore if they needed to be reviewed or seen in clinic, they would need to go back there. But the vast majority are done in community settings. And as I say, these can be planned. These aren't emergencies. These are ones where we may just need to do a scan down the line and maybe just give reassurance. A lot of them don't need treatment. But I'm not quite sure what my colleague is suggesting. Is she saying that actually 172,000 people should be subjected to surgery? Because then you've got 100% needing surgery, not 1 in 17 is the case at the moment. I say if we use those figures as being accurate. We did do a very big study. It's the biggest in the UK abortion history, looking at precisely this, and we actually found a rate of somewhere between 1 and 2%. So it's a lot less than those figures anyway.
Emily, is there some relevant? Is there some? You can come back to that as well. But is there some relevance here, Emily, which is that actually you don't support abortion at all, so you would therefore be dead against this anyway? Is that correct?
So I don't actually support killing. So I generally don't support abortion as it is. But
under any circumstances.
Obviously not. I'm not for the death penalty. I'm not for abortion. I am pro-life for the whole life. I totally am against that. But I also really do not think that the abortion industry respects women at all. I really do not think that these numbers show that they are respecting women. And I think these numbers actually show, if you read the report, these numbers show that, these numbers of women seeking treatment in hospital afterwards is because of a failure of the medication to work. And this failure is not actually treated as a complication under the numbers and under the way that these numbers are gathered. Okay, so since these complications also arise after discharge, the current method of reporting doesn't actually catch these cases and misses them. So this data that we have is actually new and is actually showing a huge way that the abortion services are lacking in their care towards women.
All right, thank you very, very much, both of you. It's good to have that debate and that discussion. I must say there were some very shocking figures there, as far as I could tell, but there's Dr Jonathan Lord, as well, co-chair of the British Society of Abortion Care Providers, and Emily Milne, Director of Communications at the Alliance for Pro-Life Studies. Right, now, Malta has become the first country in Europe to legalise cannabis for personal use, following a vote in Parliament. So the law allows over 18s to possess up to 7 grams and grow up to 4 plants at home as well. Smoking it in public will remain against the law, and anyone caught doing so in front of a child could be fined up to £425. It's thought that this may cause other European countries to now follow suit, but any chance of the UK being one of those seems unlikely for now. Well, joining us is the head of lifestyle economics at the Institute for Economic Affairs. It's Christopher Snowdon. I think I see you more than I see my own parents and family actually at the moment, Christopher. You keep popping up, but look, just run us through what's been going on in Malta, and do you ever think that we'll see something similar here?
Well, you've described the situation in Malta very well. So it won't be legal to sell it, it won't be illegal to import it, but it will be legal to grow it and possess a relatively small amount of it. So it's a big step in the right direction. Luxembourg is next in line to legalise, and I think they're going to be going a little bit further with their plans. But Malta has put them to the post. Germany is the big one. They're planning to have a regulated market in the next couple of years. So I think the dominoes are falling. We've seen in the United States a lot of the states have legalized cannabis. Excuse me. Canada has also legalized it. Uruguay has legalized it. So I think the momentum is all with the legalizers at the moment. And in places like Canada and the United States, we're talking about a fully legal market, a commercial market where you can go into a shop and buy cannabis. So in answer to your question, which a lot of people ask me over the years, I've always thought that the UK wouldn't be the first to do this by any means. But I think once you've got so many US states and an increasing number of European countries doing it, and the sky doesn't fall in, and the government makes a bit of money from taxing the stuff, then I think that eventually we'll follow suit.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, really. I mean, how can we monetise this? Presumably that would be one of the more compelling arguments for your average man and woman on the street, that if we legalise cannabis, actually this country becomes wealthier. How does that work?
Well, I did some research into this a few years ago, and I estimated that it obviously depends at what rate you tax the cannabis at, and you don't want to tax it too high. That's been the mistake in some parts of America, where the illegal market has actually ended up still being cheaper than the legal market, and there's no reason why that should be happening. But if you tax it at what I would consider to be a sort of reasonable rate, but more than just VAT, I think you're looking at about £700 million a year, which is not chicken feed. I know we're spending a vast amount at the moment, but it all comes in handy. And there's extra taxes on top of that in terms of income tax, corporation tax, all the businesses around. So I think overall you're looking at an extra £1 billion, which, as I say, is better than nothing. And you can spend a bit less, perhaps, on enforcing these unnecessary laws. But it's not just that, actually, I would say, that should appeal to the man in the street. The fact that we can regulate it and we can control the amount of THC and the amount of CBD in it is actually really important in terms of limiting the damage associated with cannabis.
Thank you very much. Sorry to cut you off there in your pomp, but I've got to go, I'm afraid. Christopher Snowdon, the head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you very much for watching the Afternoon Agenda with me, Patrick Christie's. Join me tomorrow from 4 p.m. Coming up, it's Michelle Dewberry with Jubes & Co.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast. There'll be a lot of cloud during the next 24 hours, shrouding the hills of western UK and keeping things mild. There'll be some rain as well, but that will tend to ease later as this area of high pressure moves in for the rest of the week and begins to properly settle things down widely before that happens, these weather fronts and these tightly packed isobars across northern parts of the UK bring wind and rain for Tuesday evening. Some heavier rain at times for the northwest Highlands, but through the night, the area of cloud and rain across Scotland sinks south. It clears from the far north and northwest, but it edges into Northern Ireland, parts of northern England as well. It stays cloudy across southern areas, but through this slice of central UK, clearer spells and perhaps a few pockets of fog first thing. A chilly start here as well, and once the fog clears, plenty of sunshine emerging across parts of North and East Wales, the Midlands, eastern England. Also turning brighter to the north of the Central Belt, some decent sunshine here and less windy compared to Tuesday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle, more persistent damp weather for parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northwest England. And this area of cloud and outbreaks of rain starts to move north once again on Wednesday evening, pushing into the rest of Scotland eventually overnight. Meanwhile, it stays mostly cloudy across Wales, southern and southwest England. But for the Midlands, eastern England, southern Scotland, clear spells, which will lead to, in some places, frost and even fog to begin things on Thursday. Once any fog clears, though, the best of any sunny spells will be across eastern Scotland, southern Scotland, northern and eastern England. Generally